It is December 19th, 2025, and we are going to cover the latest on the Gaza peace process that was initiated a couple months ago by Trump. And as we predicted, the process has basically fallen apart. It's collapsed. I predicted this would happen when it was signed because of how half-assed the initiative was to get it passed and implemented. And we have to ask the question, will the fighting resume eventually? It's unlikely that it's going to resume at the same intensity. But over the past couple of months since the peace process has started, both sides have broken the ceasefire. Israel's broken it about hundreds of times. The Hamas has broken it as well. The bodies have been traded. The hostage exchanges have happened and this kind of thing. And we thought a couple weeks ago with the Rafah crossing opening back up that we were making progress. The Rafah opening being the southern part of Gaza, that the area of Gaza that shares a border with Egypt, and that happened a couple weeks ago. The crossing opened back up, and a certain amount of aid has made it into the Gaza Strip after that happened, despite the fact that it's been disputed whether the final body that Hamas had and gave to the Israelis was in fact the hostage, the victim that Hamas stated that it was. So small progress was made, despite the violations of the ceasefire. But now it looks like, as we predicted, that it's completely collapsed. Why? Well, the big story is that Hamas has predictably refused to comply with the provision within the peace process that requires them to give up their firearms. I mean, this was predictable from the beginning, right? Israel, the IDF is in the Gaza Strip at the perimeter they established indefinitely. And there's no way that even if they have a sliver of the land that they were ever going to give up their weapons and demilitarize. And even if they committed to doing so, there's no way of confirming any of that, right? Because the international bodies that are supposed to be in the Gaza Strip that would ostensibly monitor any kind of relinquishing of firearms from Hamas, there's nothing there. There's no one there to monitor anything that would to monitor their relinquishing of their firearms. So we would never be able to verify it, even if they did decide to comply with this provision. But this is an article from the Wall Street Journal. It says, quote, President Trump's phased peace plan for Gaza is struggling to move beyond its initial stage, hitting obstacles in Hamas's refusal to disarm and Israel's unwillingness to retreat from the enclave until that happens. Now, again, the issue with disarmament is the prospect that the IDF would, with disarmament, is the prospect of the IDF postponing any retreats is very likely, right? So if we're going to go over a couple of the points in the peace proposal so that we can refresh our memory on exactly how this is supposed to unfold, but the disarmament is supposed to happen at the very beginning. This is supposed to be the next step after the hostage release and after the Rafah crossing. Hamas is supposed to commit to disarming. It's not until later on, much further down the road, when the international monitoring bodies have been established and are in place, security mechanisms are in place in Gaza. It's not until much later in the peace process that the IDF is actually supposed to start withdrawing from the line that they're currently at in Gaza. So that was one of the biggest issues, of course, with any prospective disarmament, was the IDF would still be there and there would be no withdrawals. We don't even know when withdrawals would start, right? There's nothing, again, concrete there that tells us when the withdrawals would actually start of the IDF from the line that they're at. So once you reach the stage when the IDF would retreat from the enclave, like we just said, there's no guarantee that they're going to exit completely. And also, one of the provisions in the peace process is that Hamas would be given the opportunity to leave the Gaza Strip without being harassed. And so once they disarm, there's no guarantee that they would actually be able to, that the members of the militia would be able to leave the Gaza Strip. So Again, why would they give up their firearms? So it's just a ridiculous provision in the deal in the first place. Not to say that it isn't right to expect them to disarm, right? But again, there's no way to verify it. So that's the biggest issue that you're going to have. So always, it's a structural issue with the agreement, and there are plenty of them. One of the biggest problems that I have with it, I would say, is that there doesn't seem to be any continuity. There are these provisions that about the exchanges of hostages and then there's this idea of disarmament. Then there's establishing the bodies and establishing bodies that are going to be part of the rebuilding process in Gaza, establishing security bodies. And then eventually, after negotiations, if negotiations are successful and if certain requirements are met, then the IDF starts withdrawing from the line that they're at right now. It's like the order is so convoluted. Structurally, that's why I say structurally, we went over these problems with the peace process already. But just a refresher. So this is point 2. We're going to go to a few points in the peace proposal that we can so that we can better understand why this problem has cropped up. And point 2 read that if both sides agree to the proposal, the war would immediately end. Israeli forces will withdraw to the agreed upon line to prepare for a hostage release, which is where they're at right now. The hostage release happened. During this time, all military operations, including aerial and artillery bombardment, will be suspended. It hasn't been. The battle lines will remain frozen until conditions are met for the complete staged withdrawal. And again, the withdrawal has to be negotiated, right? So that's going to be another indefinite negotiation, and the IDF is likely never going to leave the line that they're at right now. They're basically destroying everything behind that line presently, right? And they're getting it ready for settlers, right? And whatever kind of economic plan Trump and I would assume his Arab partners are wanting to employ in that part of the Gaza Strip. But they're not exposed to the coastal area, and I think that's one of the things I've went over before. It's in order for them to do some of the things they're wanting to do, like Trump wanting to expel everyone there and do a Riviera of the Mideast, you kind of need the ocean front. So that would be my assumption. So that's point 2. Point 6, once all hostages are returned, Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence and to decommissioning their weapons will be given amnesty. Members of Hamas who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage to receiving countries. So they say that they'll be given an amnesty, and this is just some asides, but they're given an amnesty if they decommission their weapons and want to peacefully coexist, and they're given this amnesty. That's pretty broad, I don't think obviously Israel will never let that happen. Members of Hamas who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage, and that's the key that we were just discussing. If they decommission their weapons and they, go along with this compliance, there's no guarantee the IDF will leave or give them safe passage out of Gaza. So reasons why they wouldn't want to give their weapons up. And then point 16, this is the crucial part to this story, to understanding the larger part of this story we're covering. Israel will not occupy or annex Gaza. As the ISF establishes control and stability, and that's going to be sort of the multinational security force that is supposed to be coming into place in Gaza. So as they establish control and stability, the IDF will withdraw based on standards, milestones, and timeframes linked to demilitarization that will be agreed upon between the IDF, ISF, the guarantors, the United States, and with the objective of a secure Gaza that no longer poses a threat to Israel, Egypt, or its citizens. That's a long sentence, and that's a lot of requirements, right? You have to think. They're going to withdraw based on standards, milestones, timeframes, all of which need to be negotiated, linked to demilitarization that will be agreed upon, and here are the negotiators, between the IDF, the ISF, the guarantors, and the United States. So that's a lot of hurdles, right? And so I'm sure that Hamas is basically saying, well, look, we're never going to meet the standard necessary for them to withdraw from the Gaza Strip. So why would we disarm? Why would we not just risk going back to war if we're going to be killed anyways? We won't be allowed to leave. If we give up our weapons, they'll kill us where we stand and this kind of thing. So the pushback makes sense, but again, this is kind of a flawed provision within the agreement itself. It's not to say that Hamas shouldn't be disarmed. Obviously they should, but this isn't well thought out. This is like built to fail so that Israel can basically go back in and finish the exterminations and expulsions that they've started in 23. Practically, the point goes on, point 16 of the agreement, practically the IDF will progressively hand over the Gaza territory it occupies to the ISF, according to the agreement they will make with the transitional authority until they are withdrawn completely from Gaza. Save for the security parameter presence that will remain until Gaza is properly secure from any resurgent territory. That just means they're never going to leave. The IDF will never leave the Gaza Strip. And any multinational coalition that will be involved with stabilizing, rebuilding the Gaza Strip, securing it, they will probably never leave either if they ever go in. Because if this is a multinational Arab coalition, including the United States, many of the Arab countries will probably not want anything to do with this, backstopping what Israel is, actually attempting to do, which is expand. So the article continues, the initial phase left Gaza divided in two, with Israel controlling a little over half of the enclave and Hamas the rest. About 51% is what I believe Israel controls right now. They already made it pretty clear they won't be relinquishing the territory it presently occupies. I've read reports on that over the past couple of weeks. The article continues, the second phase of the plan requires Hamas to give up governance, disarm, and transfer control of the territory to the international force of troops in a technocratic committee, the Palestinians who would run it. None of these bodies have been, I don't even think they've started discussions on any of this stuff yet, right? And again, you have to think how monumental and how much commitment it would take to establish these multinational bodies, these international forces of troops and civil servants for the Gaza Strip, or what's left of it, right? And also you wonder, will they be able to, at the end of the day, are they going to be, is this governance force, this security force that they're wanting to put in there, is it just going to be behind the line, or is it going to also be on the other side, right? How is that going to work? So a board of peace chaired by Trump would oversee the process. Israel would retreat from most of Gaza, and the massive undertaking of rebuilding the shattered land would commence. And that's a little misleading because, as we pointed out above, point 16 of the peace plan is the first mention of the IDF withdrawals from the Strip after the rebuilding starts. This could leave an open-ended deadline, right? In other words, endless negotiations like we talked about. But, the article kind of gets that backwards. It says the Board of Peace would oversee the process. Israel would retreat from most of Gaza, presumably in this article after the Hamas hands over their weaponry. They would retreat from most of Gaza, and then the undertaking of rebuilding would commence. And like I said, after they give up their weapons, in the peace agreement, then these international bodies are formed, whether it be security or civil, administrative. Then after that, the building is going to start the rebuilding and refurbishing of Gaza, and then these negotiations are going to start relative to the withdrawal of the remaining IDF to a certain parameter, still within the Gaza Strip. So they won't even be withdrawing and going out of the Gaza Strip. So like I said, they're going to be there indefinitely. Now, our article continues, Hamas still controls half of Gaza and refuses to disarm, creating a domino effect that stalls the plan and risks leaving it in limbo. It's not in limbo, it's just finished. It's collapsed, right? Is the fighting going to continue at the same intensity? Probably not, at least not right now, right? With midterms coming up, I'm sure that Trump has finally found a backbone and probably told Netanyahu to keep the shit quiet over there and don't start anything during midterms. Because again, that's going to be something that could cause Trump to lose the midterms if this peace process, the collapse of this peace process, becomes too obvious. So most countries won't send troops into Hamas territory as long as the U.S. designated terrorist group remains there. Some countries are considering sending troops into the territory controlled by Israel. Like we said, where are they going to go? Where are the administrative officials going to go? The multinational administrative and civil officials, and where are the security forces going to go? Are they just going to leave the areas that Hamas still controls, or are they going to govern both sides, or just the side the Israelis occupy? We don't know. But the Arab countries don't want to appear to be supporting the Israeli occupation. Now, we're going to look at point 15 that kind of gives us some background on what we're talking about here. The U.S. will work with Arab and international partners. This is before point 16 when they're supposed to start negotiating withdrawals, the IDF. Point 15, the U.S. will work with Arab and international partners to develop a temporary international stabilization force, the ISF, like we talked about, to immediately deploy to Gaza. The ISF will train and provide support to vetted Palestinian police forces in Gaza and will consult with Jordan and Egypt, who have extensive experience in this field. Now, the U.S. and Arab international partners will develop this ISF. I'm sure that this is going to be mercenaries, private military corporations of the likes of what, Eric Prince owns. So I'm sure his people are over there, the GHF, I believe it's called, the humanitarian organization that was operating when Israel wasn't allowing the UN to bring food into the Gaza Strip. There was an organization that was tied heavily with private military corporations that were operating to distribute food in the Gaza Strip. I'm sure they'll have something to do with this ISF. As far as I know, this process hasn't started yet. Now, this force will be the long-term internal security solution. The ISF trains these Palestinians, and there would be the security solution. Not going to happen. The ISF will work with Israel and Egypt to help secure border areas. Palestinians working with the Israelis. That's a good one. Along with newly trained Palestinian police forces. It is critical to prevent munitions from entering Gaza and to facilitate the rapid and secure flow of goods to rebuild and revitalize Gaza. A deconfliction mechanism will be agreed upon by all the parties. Now, I'm guessing another reason the Arab international partners are also hesitant to deploy their military personnel is because they probably fear the IDF will assassinate them, right? I mean, we don't know if it was the IDF or Hamas that did this, but there was a militia that was being financed. It was being bankrolled, a militia of tribal Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. We talked about in another video that were being bankrolled and armed by Israel, by the IDF, to fight against Hamas, and their leader was just murdered the other day. And so I'm not sure, maybe it's out there who was responsible for it. We'll probably never know that, but this is probably why a lot of Arab countries are hesitant to deploy their forces over there and work alongside the IDF, which is hostile. Both sides are hostile towards each other. So that would be a volatile situation, right? This is Trump. This is signature Trump. This is, well, I just wanted the firing to stop. And so he got the firing to stop. And then the rest of it, he's basically saying, look, I don't want anything else to do with this. This is too messy and too complicated. And it's going to hurt me politically. And this is how he's going to handle all the other conflicts around there. We've talked about them. So the article goes on here. It says, quote, I think the most important sticking point here is reality, said Ofer Shalad, director of national security policy research at the Tel Aviv-based Institute for National Security Studies. From the get-go, the whole idea of what's beyond phase one was very vague. But the U.S. administration does not do details, does not do complicated, and does not do long-term. And I've said this in several videos about this situation, the situation in Ukraine, the situation in Congo, Sudan, all of these many wars and conflicts that Trump has claimed to end. They really haven't ended. They've just been put on ice for a little bit. They've been shelved, right, for the next administration probably to handle, or for him to have to handle later on in his administration. But I think that's key. They don't deal in details. They don't deal in complicated, and they don't deal in the long term, right? That's how this thing is defined. And it is vague, right? Again, it's just structurally, like when I read articles about this, I'm wondering, they're saying the next phase is halted. I'm thinking, what was the next phase? It says what they wanted to do in the peace process, but it doesn't say, here's what's going to happen. After this is going to happen. Here's a time frame for how long it's going to take to put together this ISF force, this international security force, or this force that's going to train the international security force. It doesn't say how long it's going to take to put that together or what the deadline is, how the discussions are supposed to be structured and how they're supposed to flow. Like an example like that, you don't see it there. There's no details on that. Goes on and says a U.S. official told the Wall Street Journal that Trump will soon announce the members of the Board of Peace, which will include other heads of state. Notice how they've not talked about the technocratic civil authority, nor have they talked about this international stabilization force that's supposed to be training the security forces in Gaza. Because as Trump himself has suggested, achieving the goal is the easy way. Negotiations are the hard way. A potential sign that he would use... let me see, I got this mixed up. Excuse me here. Oh, here we are. Israel's Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu, is set to meet Trump in the U.S. this month. In the U.S., military's CENTCOM convened counterparts in Doha this week to try to break the deadlock. In Trump's eagerness to secure a deal that would stop the fighting, some analysts said Washington was willing to move ahead without a clear commitment from Hamas to disarm. So again, if they're willing to look past the disarmament, that's just setting the stage for further conflict, 100%. Right? The IDF is in such close proximity to them right now. Something is going to set into motion the kinetic aspect of the conflict again. We'll see that happening for sure if they bypass this. And they'll have no one to blame but themselves for not taking it seriously, for not taking the time to actually forge a deal that they can enforce. And of course, a lot of people will say, well, you can't negotiate with the terrorists. It's like, well, they don't have really any other choice. They failed to eradicate Hamas like they wanted. They took 3 years, 70,000 lives later. Probably about a third of those were actually affiliated with Hamas. The rest were civilians, So wrapping up here for both Israel and Hamas, for now, both Israel and Hamas appear comfortable with the status quo. Of course they are, because they want to continue fighting. In the 2 months since the ceasefire took effect, Hamas has moved to entrench its power in areas of control, while Israel has effectively established a worldwide, largely depopulated buffer zone where it has freedom to demolish what it identifies as terrorist infrastructure with fewer risks to troops. Key there to understand is, in 2 months since the ceasefire took place, Hamas is entrenched, likely rearmed, refurbished their arms and all of these things, re-strengthened. And we just passed a military spending bill that allocates, I believe, $8 billion, $10 billion to Israel. And there are a lot of goodies in there for Israel. So it's like they're both just, kind of rearming right now. This is the reason why Vladimir Putin is saying, I don't want a ceasefire. It's because this is inevitably leading to another kinetic conflict between Hamas and Israel. It's going to get hot again likely next year because they're all just disarming. They're getting Israel's getting flushed with fresh cash from the U.S. That's all that's going on, right? And eventually it could lead to another conflagration between Israel and Iran, So the Trump administration is hoping to recruit 10,000 troops. Again, this is from the Journal, that would serve under a U.S. general for Gaza, but officials have acknowledged it would take most of next year to get them in place. Now, I've read that those troops are going to be operating in Israel. It says here that they're going to be serving under a U.S. general in Gaza, so a lot of disinformation that's coming from, a couple different sources. This is just from Wall Street Journal. Are there going to be American troops there in the middle of all this? Is this kind of setting us up for something larger than what we've seen since 23? Or the strikes against Iran last year? It's possible. But pay close attention to the troop deployment in Gaza. And so, like I said, ultimately the fighting is going to probably start back, even if foreign personnel, security personnel enter the Gaza Strip to try to stabilize things. Fighting is probably going to start back, and it'll likely be a lot worse. So that's our update on the situation in Gaza and the faltered collapsed peace process. So that's all we have for today, and we'll see you the next time. If we don't do a video again, have a Merry Christmas. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you the next time.